Well, would you look at that? They've done it again. For the third time in this core alone, the community is left asking one question. Was that the new best fight of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc? First we had Ichigo vs Yhwach arc round 2, then Ichigo vs Uryu, and now we find ourselves with Renji vs Uryu, a surprising but incredible showcase of the new power attained by these two characters who actually fought side by side once before, and now they come to blows upon Yhwach arc's new holy ground, Varvelt. Not only did this fight look absolutely stunning here in the anime, while managing to do justice to both of these fan-favourite characters in a pretty big way, it also took Renji's new Bankai, Soar Zabimaru, and expanded on it enormously, giving us a totally fresh look at the Vice Captain's ultimate power in a way we would have never even thought possible before. To be honest, just watching this fight play out is nigh unbelievable. It is hard to fathom where we find ourselves now. Renji has transformed, completely transformed, from being a perennial punching bag to a complete and utter monster, capable of devastating entire cityscapes whose power we apparently only caught a glimpse of in his last battle with Mask Demasculine, while Uryu, one of Ichigo's closest friends, has power matching that of the Zero Division, and a string of high-profile victories under his belt. Seeing the two of them, who once struggled to even injure the 8th Espada while working together as a team, now coming together in such a violent yet profound way is a testament to how far both they and the series has come. So, as I continue to work on the review for episode 33, Gate of the Sun, that's going to be a good one, today I wanted to take a deeper look at Renji's true Bankai, Soar Zabimaru, with the new information we've gleaned from this week's episode and this brand new fight scene to go on. The Bankai, which we have seen briefly a couple of times before up until now, and likely will see briefly again unless the end of this episode dramatically changes Renji's path in the story, which it may, was never afforded that much time in the sun. There simply wasn't the time to do so, really, but now we know considerably more. So let's take a look. Before we get started on the video, guys, there will be some spoilers for the remainder of the 1,000-Year Blood War arc to follow, only really tiny ones, I'd say, in general, but some spoilers all the same. And if you did enjoy this video when you're done with it, if you want to see more from me and the channel, then make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, as it really does help me out, and I really do appreciate all of your continued support. First up, briefly, what have we seen from Soar Zabimaru in the past? Well, I'll tell you one thing. After this week's episode, it is painfully clear that Renji was only using a fraction of his Bankai's power to kill Mask Demasculine, an already incredible feat considering the way Mask destroyed both Kensei and Rose in the battle prior. During his training in the Royal Palace, Ichibei revealed to Renji that Zabimaru had been keeping his true name from him all this time, and after telling Renji the true name of his Bankai, Ichibei declared that it was then up to the Shinigami himself to force Zabimaru to submit to him once again in a brutal training session, all while under the watchful gaze of the monk. Renji was successful and attained a much higher form of power, higher than I think any of us really even imagined. His old half-step Bankai, Hihio Zabimaru, that we had spent so much time with in the past, was no more. In its place now was Soar Zabimaru, a Bankai that reflected the true nature of Renji Zanpakuto perhaps better than ever before. As Mask Demasculine attacks Renji with his ultimate ability Star Flash Supernova, Renji activates his Bankai at the last second in order to protect himself from the explosion. In an intriguing moment, Renji seemingly assembles his new Bankai right then and there for the very first time, something that really isn't clear at all in the manga. After revealing Zabimaru appearing through the smoke and flames and looking pretty cool, Renji proceeds to battle Mask and easily overpower him. Mask flies towards Renji, but calling out the name Hihio, Renji controls the giant ape arm component of his Bankai and grapples with Mask using its enormous hand, breaking the sternritter's arm before flinging him effortlessly into a nearby building. Next, Renji lunges for Mask and now calls out the name Orochio, which unfurls the snake-like vertebrae from around his waist, turning it into a tail that seemingly attaches to Renji's sword arm. It's difficult to know for sure, giving off the appearance of his original Bankai, while transforming the blade of his new Bankai into a wicked-looking serrated sword. If you think that's a little bit confusing, just you wait. After impaling Mask with his changed blade, Renji activates his final power, Zaga Teppo, which calls forth a gigantic, flaming snake head that seemingly swallows both fighters whole. But as Renji closes his fist, the snake head clamps down on Mask with its massive jaws, incinerating the sternritter and killing him instantly. It was a short but effective demonstration. Most readers came away from this fight in agreement that Renji had become immensely more powerful, and his new Bankai was clear-cut evidence of that fact. After this, we saw Zabimaru once more very briefly when Renji used it to defend both himself and Rukia from falling debris later in the second invasion. In the far-flung future, Renji uses Zabimaru against Yhwach in the very final battle, but has his arm instantly removed. So as you can see, we didn't have a lot to go on. It was the Mask Demasculine fight or nothing. Renji destroyed Mask Demasculine with his Bankai, and really, that was the end of it. Well, fast forward to today, and we have a brand new anime-exclusive fight for Renji to pore over frame by frame, including a much expanded and frankly surprising look at his Bankai in action. Having invaded Yhwach's new nation of Varvelt along with the rest of the Gotei 13, Renji runs into Uryu and the two quickly engage in battle. After briefly swatting aside a few of Uryu's arrows, Renji closes the distance between them before activating his true Bankai, Zabimaru, shocking Uryu. Here, we get a very brief look at the Bankai's actual activation. Now that Renji has seemingly assembled it in the battle with Mask, he no longer needs to do that. The bone fingers of Hihio snap into place as a sword bursts out of Orochio's mouth. It is pretty cool. Immediately, we are treated to Zabimaru's first new ability right here, Zazeka. By activating Zazeka, Renji transforms the blade of his Bankai into a fanged, segmented whip, very reminiscent of his Shikai, which is a nice callback. As soon as the whip comes into contact with Uryu, it seemingly explodes in a huge ball of fire, though the whip itself is of course intact. Now up next, things are a little less clear. It becomes harder to know exactly what certain abilities do in this moment. As Renji continues to swing his whip at Uryu, he then calls the name Orochio, which we've heard before, the same one he called against Mask Demasculine that transformed the blade of his Bankai into the serrated version that he then stabbed Mask with, as well as unfurled his vertebrae belt from around him. The distinct variations are clearest here in the manga, where you can clearly see the bone snake was originally just a belt around his waist, and then once he calls Orochio, it is now attached to Renji's arm where it wasn't originally. However, in this episode, that doesn't happen. For starters, as you can see at the beginning of their confrontation, it looks like the vertebrae attached to Renji is already unfurled and is in fact connected to his sword arm. And that will become important later. Instead, with the whip of Zazeka already active, it is now much harder to know what calling out Orochio actually does. And this is where things get truly crazy, and it is hard to know what is what. But at the same time, I have to say, I am astonished by the amount of tiny, fluid details that the anime team has poured into Renji's Bankai here. As Renji leaps from a building, in a blink and you'll miss it moment, he uses the enormous ape arm of Hihio to grab the unfurled vertebrae attached to his sword arm and rip the entire thing from his body. Everything on this arm comes flying off. Renji quite literally grabs the flowing vertebrae and tears everything off, even destroying his shoulder pad in the process. Now he's wielding everything that he used to be wearing upon that arm, sword and all, as a whip. And thereby it looks like he's using Hihio Zabimaru once again, which I do really like. It was a shame to completely lose most of the visual style of that old Bankai, so to me, this is a great compromise. As he uses his ape arm to pull his new bone snake whip backwards, the segmented whip of Zazeka, which is currently emerging from the snake's mouth, disappears in a flourish, replaced instead with that old familiar blade. So I'm left with the question still, what did calling Orochio actually do here? Did that transform the whip of Zazeka back into the blade? If so, it's very delayed. Or was it just Renji letting the snake arm know that he wanted to use it as a whip and that he was about to rip it from his body? Regardless, what's kind of crucial here is that Renji seems to be able to tear off chunks of his Bankai to use at will as extensions of his own body, as though his Bankai is now modular, all the while cycling through various weapons and abilities by calling out different names. I mean, this is now 3 different weapons that can emerge from the snake's mouth. The basic blade, the serrated blade, and now this segmented whip. But in this instance, we're back to the basic blade, but it's not quite as simple as that, as the blade inside the snake's mouth suddenly heats up, glowing a simmering, brilliant orange. Perhaps this is Orochio in action, I'm not sure, but Renji then flings that sword whip towards Uryu. The sword burns right through Uryu's arrow, but the Quincy sidesteps it. Here, though, we really get to see that old Hihio Zabimaru visual on display. The burning hot sword pierces a building behind Uryu, melting right through the stone wall before violently exploding, destroying several rows of houses in a huge inferno. Also, it seems like Renji's Zabimaru is now explicitly a fire-type Zanpakuto, or at least the Bankai is anyway, when it absolutely wasn't beforehand. After this, we get to see Sou Zabimaru's defensive capabilities, and things are a little more straightforward here. As Uryu rains arrows down upon him from above, Renji calls out for Hihio, and the gigantic ape arm reaches up into the air to intercept the arrows, covering Renji with its enormous bulk. The arrows that would have struck Renji instead bury themselves into the ape's fur, leaving the vice captain unharmed. But wait, the ape arm is no longer holding the bone snake whip. As we can see in this sequence, the whip, the snake, the sword, it is all back on Renji's right arm once again. But all isn't quite as it seems, and this is what I mean by the amount of crazy little details that they've added to this Bankai that you just wouldn't notice unless, as a nerd like me, you were pausing on most of the frames. As we can see from this shot, and a few others in a moment, again it is incredibly easy to miss, the snake arm hasn't reattached itself to Renji fully. Instead, the vertebrae is now wrapped around Renji's forearm, and he slings it at Uryu like a whip once more. He's not holding onto it with his hand just yet, it is just wrapped around his forearm, and then he clutches onto the end of the whip. And so now, with the whip coiled around Renji's arm again, visible slightly better here, he is now able to freely control the snake head as it soars through the air, clamping down on a piece of stone debris in the sky. Using this, almost like an enormous flail, Renji brings the snake head and the chunk of stone combination down upon Uryu before using the snake's mouth to grapple him, pinning the Quincy to a wall. With Uryu trapped, Renji closes the distance once again. A surge of fiery orange Reiatsu seems to pulse through the inside of the snake vertebrae and into Hihio. It fills Hihio up, charging an explosive punch inside the ape arm. The arm vents some of that power from the mouth-like hole on its surface in a manner similar to Edrad's Volcanica form, before Renji unleashes his explosive punch, sending Uryu through a building. Are we lost at all? I'm trying my best to get everything down here and as simply as possible, but the main thing I was surprised about when taking a deeper look at what we got from Sword Zabimaru this week is just how mechanically complex it actually is, and so much of that depth flits by in lightning-fast flashes. With Uryu now on the ground, Renji does us a favour by returning his Bankai to its original state from the start of the battle. The snake's head is back on his forearm, sword and all, and he rams the blade into Uryu's gut before activating a very familiar power, Zaga Teppo. Yes, this is the same ability Renji used to kill Mask Demasculine. Twisting his hand, Renji conjures a massive fiery snake's head above the two of them, and its jaws close tightly shut on Uryu, the same move that reduced Mask to ash. The explosion this creates is absolutely colossal, leaving behind a tremendous crater in its wake as embers drift into the air around them. However, Uryu has protected himself, not just with Blut, but with his Quincy Volstendish, and so the fight continues. When a newly powered up Uryu fires a massive arrow at Renji, Renji unleashes the serrated whip of Zazeka once again to counter it, only he doesn't call the ability's name here. Defending himself from Uryu's relentless volley of arrows with Hihio's giant arm once more, Renji places his thumb upon his index finger, and as he does so, causes the ape arm to shed all of its fur, leaving behind a giant skeletal limb. Whether this means its defences are now weakened without the fur or not, I'm not sure, but Renji is sent flying while clumps of the fur drop onto the floor. As Uryu steps on one, Renji activates his trap, revealing another new ability, Hihi Tensho. Giant ape arms identical to Hihio spring from the fur clumps on the ground and entomb Uryu, holding him tightly in place. In execution, this is an ability that reminds me a little bit of Renji's last-ditch Shikai power, Higa Zeko, as seen against Aizen in the Soul Society arc. But with Uryu helpless, Renji reveals his ultimate trump card. Once again disengaging the sword arm and transforming it into a whip, akin in design once more to Hihio Zabimaru, Renji now leaps into the air and grabs the whip with his ape hand once again. The skeletal snake whip then begins to fill with a surging orange power once more, and Renji, now hovering in the sky, starts to spin the whip around his head. A little bit similar, I guess, to how he spins his Shikai when facing down Xyloporo. He notes that he needs 20 seconds to power this ability up, which I think is another reference, this time to when he told Uryu he could only hold Xyloporo off for, you guessed it, 20 seconds. As Renji continues to spin his now flaming whip, he declares the ability's name, Zyga Zeko, before the whip itself is engulfed in flame. It is completely aflame, Renji now spinning a vortex of all-consuming fire above his head. Uryu can only look on, still being held in place by Hihi Tensho as Renji brings Zyga Zeko down upon his foe, unleashing a torrential blast of fire that obliterates a massive portion of one of Varvelt's branches, visible from across the nation itself in a glowing fireball. However, Uryu survives the attack because he's now completely broken, and uses a new ability of his own, Fedezwinga, to rob Renji of his power, completely dismantling both his Shikai and Bankai and leaving him helpless. And yet, despite the seeming desperation of his situation, Renji performs something that I'm not sure we've ever seen before, though do let me know in the comments below if I'm forgetting something. Calling out Uryu for not understanding Bankai, Renji seems to manage to forcibly conjure an element of his Bankai using what I have to assume is just his own raw life force. If that's the case, this is likely a result of Renji's new understanding of the blade is me, which he was taught the truth of in the royal palace. He and Zabimaru are one, the two kings. They share a soul, and so even now, with no Ryoryoku really left to feed his Bankai, Renji still manages to, perhaps at great personal expense, rip forth one last vestige of power from within himself. All that appears, all that he can muster from within his own spirit is a naked arm. Hihio's arm, nothing but a skeletal limb, but with it Renji reveals his final ability, and it's a familiar one. Hikot's Tai-Ho, the signature move of his previous Bankai. Channeling what little power it can, Zabimaru makes a last-ditch effort to launch a blast, powering up, fire bursting from the vent on its shoulder again as it shoots a golden ball of energy from the palm of its outstretched hand. Of course, in the face of Uryu's own strength, what little Renji can muster basically on death's door is no longer enough, and he's defeated. Remember that last section talking about this final, I think, unseen move where Renji conjures an element of Zabimaru from his own skin, his own body? That is really speculation on my part. I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below as to what we're actually seeing here. But okay, so that's a lot. This is a surprisingly deep Bankai, to be honest, the vast majority of which was revealed to us in this episode. Uryu calls Renji out early in the fight for relying on physical strength all the time, and I guess he is, but with a lot more nuance than anyone really expected. And the list of abilities now afforded to Zabimaru seems to be virtually endless. Again, it really does seem like Renji killed Mask by barely breaking a sweat, which itself is crazy to consider. So, to sum up, these are the abilities Renji is seen using in this fight. Zazeka, which transforms the Bankai's blade into a segmented whip in reference to Zabimaru's Shikai. The whip can cause explosions on contact. Orochio, which I'm not sure what it actually does. I do wonder if this is what allows Renji to grab the snake arm and transform it into a whip itself, or it could be the new boiling hot sword ability that we also see, considering when he uses it against Mask the Masculine, Orochio changes the shape of his blade. But Renji can also freely control the snake whip, especially with it wrapped around his forearm, as we see later. Hihio, which allows Renji to defend himself with the giant ape arm. By going another step further, Renji can use Hihi Tensho to shed the arm of its fur, creating a trap which then springs numerous ape arms from the ground. With the ape arm, Renji can also unleash charged up explosive punches too. Zaga Teppo, the ability Renji uses to kill Mask, which conjures a giant, fiery snake head before it clamps down with its jaws and incinerates its target. Renji's new trump card, Zyga Zeko, which requires 20 seconds to be pulled off successfully. The ape arm grabs the snake whip and spins it around, transforming it into a thunderous firestorm, which Renji then brings down upon his foe. And finally, I think, Renji has demonstrated the ability to call forth a portion of his Bankai from, I think, his very soul itself, a sign of the two kings working as one together. But that's it for this video on Renji's new Bankai, his true Bankai, Zabimaru, now that we have a much, much clearer look at what it can do and what it can achieve. This is likely to be everything Zabimaru is capable of, considerably more than I think any of us ever really anticipated. I certainly didn't expect to get anything else on Zabimaru itself, so this was very eye-opening, and I can only hope that we get something similar to this for other Bankai as well. Even if Hakano Togame is too newly earned of a Bankai to get a deep dive like this, I'd still love to see it again. But do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, guys. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and I hope you got something of value from it too. So many small details of this Bankai as used in this fight were tucked away in the briefest of frames, so I hope you were able to take something from this video as well. Let me know what you think of Zabimaru now that we've seen basically everything it can likely do. Do you like Renji's new Bankai? How do you think it stacks up to other Bankai in the series? Could he have defeated Uryu in any situation, or was he always going to lose? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts down in the comments below. And as always, I want to end the video by saying a massive thank you and giving a huge shout out to my wonderful supporters over on Patreon, without who I simply wouldn't be able to keep doing this. If you want to support me over on Patreon as well because you enjoy the work that I do here over on my channel, then thank you so very much. And by supporting me at the $1 tier a month, you can get your name in the credits of every single video just like this. And at the $2 tier or higher, you can enjoy every single video of mine absolutely free of baked-in YouTube ads. Okay everyone, thank you again so very much for watching. Until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.